Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 89. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday. Steelers Nation getting ready for Super Bowl 59 between the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs. Dave and I will make our picks a little bit later in the show. Also, later in the show will be our Senior Bowl Roundtable with Ross McCorkle and Jonathan Hightritter to get their takes and input on the prospects who could intrigue Pittsburgh down from their experience at Mobile last week. Dave, how you doing?
Happy Friday. I'm doing well. Exciting weekend on tap, obviously, with the Super Bowl on Sunday. So I look forward to, overall, I think the lead up in the media coverage has been pretty good overall. I think Radio Row's been very entertaining, especially when it comes to some Steelers stuff that has come out of there this week. So, generally, especially when the Steelers are not involved, which has been the case for far too long now, not involved in the Super Bowl. It's kind of a week where you think, let's just get to the game. But I actually have found myself kind of enjoying this week. And like I said, specifically, some of the stuff that has come out of Radio Row has been entertaining.
And we'll talk about maybe a little bit of that throughout today's show. Also, you're a new look, Dave Bryan, right? You got some new ink. Sat in the chair yesterday.
I did. I got I faced the needle once again, and on the heels of last Friday giving blood, thankfully again, and did what they call a power red segment where they take actually it's the most desirable as far as because you can give 2 units of blood. What they do is they take the red blood cells out, and then they put back the rest along with some saline. It's a good 30 minutes in the chair of getting poked and all like that. And I got this massive blood bruise on my right arm now. It's the most I've ever bruised when it comes to that. So what do? I go back on the other arm on yesterday and had a near 2-hour ink session to get that ink done. So I'm interested to see how that goes about healing. But love the needle, and I've had enough of the needle last week or so.
We'll talk Steelers Ireland in just 1 second, but what was your first tattoo and how old were you when you got it? Were you like 8? I feel like that's like a Dave Bryan story.
Not that. Actually, it was oh Lord. After my good buddy Chris passed away of colon cancer some 20-something 5 years ago, on my left arm, I got his favorite colors were red and black, and I got a red circle with a thick black outline on it with a kanji symbol in the middle. The definition of it is intense, because my best buddy Chris was a very intense guy, and I got it on my left arm because I was always his right hand man, if you will. So some symbolistic kind of stuff. So that was my first one. That's old enough now. It's been sun damaged enough over the years growing up in Florida that I'm gonna probably have to get that one redone at some point here and recolored. But that was the first.
What a great tribute. So thank you for sharing that. So we'll push on now to some Steelers talk, because we got a lot to discuss here despite Pittsburgh not playing in the big game this weekend. A ton of Steelers-related news and notes. The biggest of all that was the NFL's worst-kept secret for weeks and maybe even months. Pittsburgh will officially host a game in Ireland in 2025. It'll take place at Croke Park in Dublin, the NFL's first ever regular season game in Ireland, although Pittsburgh played a preseason game there at Croke Park back in 1997 against the Chicago Bears. Of course, the Irish Roonies. Makes a lot of sense. No official word on when the game will take place or who the opponent will be. Been a lot of strong rumors about Green Bay. One report coming out of ESPN Radio in Green Bay, it'll be the Packers September 28th. That has not been confirmed, but the Packers have been strongly rumored as at least the opposition, but we know for sure, finally, we can talk about it. Pittsburgh in Ireland in 2025.
Yeah, a lot of worst kept secret for a while now was that they were going to play in Ireland, and obviously with the Steelers having the extra home game this year due to the rotating schedule, it made it easier to put that together. And then just look, all the stuff, all the media stuff that the Steelers were doing over in Ireland made a lot of sense. Obviously the roots of the Rooneys and all like that. I'm sure Dan Rooney would or is up in heaven smiling down that this is finally coming to fruition here. We should obviously caution that I think it's being thrown around that they think that this game will happen, I don't know, week 4, week 5, or sometime in September. Obviously, it'll be at Croke Park. Obviously, we'll be in Dublin, Ireland. Look, it's going to do very, very well over there. And I imagine a lot of Steeler fans will travel to that. And the speculation has been, I think, for a couple of weeks now that the Packers will be the opposition. It's not set in stone, but it sure seems like things are pointing that way. I don't think we'll get the official announcement on that till probably right around when the schedule drops. What is that? Usually in around April time, somewhere around
typically May,
yeah,
post-draft.
But it just it's officially official now, as we like to say there. And I would imagine that week leading up to it will be a fun week to kind of cover, even from sitting in mom's basement here. So definitely something to look forward to when it comes to that. And once again, probably was the worst kept secret of this offseason when it comes to scheduling. And now we'll wait for the finer details involved in that.
Pittsburgh's first international game since 2013, that ugly London loss in Minnesota that started out Pittsburgh 0-4. Hopefully that does not happen when Pittsburgh plays their game in 2025. I know, like you said, we'll both be at home, so the venue matters maybe less to us. But are you excited for Pittsburgh playing in Ireland? I am. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think I love the homage, the history. I think, as you said, it's going to be really well received and well attended. I think Croke Park's max capacity is like 82,000. I imagine they'll be filled to the brim for this game. I know some fans, are bummed about losing out on the home game. I do understand that, but I think it's just really, really cool.
Yeah, I think, and we'll learn a lot about more about Ireland, I'm sure, as we go along in this thing. And once again, I think the pageantry that leading up to it and all will probably be fantastic. And I'm sure we'll have several press conferences, even more than some of the quotes that are out there today. And yeah, I think leading up to this game will be very, very spectacular. And I'm sure the crowd will be at capacity, and a lot of people probably can't wait. I think it's good for the NFL, and I understand people upset about losing a home game, but that's why you're seeing it in a season where the Steelers have, quote unquote, 9 home games, so they don't have to give up one of the other 8 when it comes to that. So if the opponent ends up being the Packers, that'll obviously be good for them. A strong fan base globally as well, due to their winning traditions over the years. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Me too. So should be a lot of fun whenever that time comes near, which again, reporting late September, but we'll just have to wait and see on official word. And now NFL has 6 international games tabbed for 2025, and already announced they'll play in Australia in 2026. And so the NFL's expansion globally continues, and that train probably won't be stopping anytime soon.
Right.
All right, Dave. NFL Honors was held last night. No Steelers coming away with any hardware, although some received voting. Most notably, TJ Watt, one of the 5 finalists for Defensive Player of the Season. He finished 4th behind Patrick Surtain, Trey Hendrickson, and also Myles Garrett. Watt received 3 first-place votes, but Surtain won this one convincingly. Other Steelers players, coaches getting some minor voting way down ballot. Again, Watt was the only finalist for any of these awards, although Larry Ogunjobi, the team's nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year, he did not win. Pittsburgh could not go back-to-back after Cam Heyward took home the prestigious honor last year, went to Jaguars defensive lineman Eric Armstead. But other Steelers players to receive votes, Cam Heyward got a couple of Defensive Player of the Year voting. He got some for Comeback Player of the Year. We agree that he should have been a finalist for Comeback Player of the Year coming off the injury that he had in the historically good season he had in 2024 based on his age and production. What else, Dave? Mike Tomlin got a couple Coach of the Year votes for third place, nothing first place. Some assistants got some fifth place voting as well. Danny Smith, even Arthur Smith got a vote for fifth place Coach of the Year. Again, no hardware, not the most interesting night for Pittsburgh from an NFL honor standpoint. Watt, the most notable, but that is at least the thoroughness of what happened last night.
I think the most disappointing aspect for me, from a Steelers perspective, was I really thought Cameron Heyward would have. Where did he finish? Ninth, I think, in Comeback Player of the Year award. I mean, it felt like he should have, we both agreed going into this. It seemed like he should have been a finalist for this. And I guess I guess he probably wasn't because maybe the 50 voters did see him come back from that injury last year. Had he probably missed the entire season, maybe he would have got more run there. But I was disappointed overall that ninth was where he finished in the voting. It felt like he should have received more votes, even though we both knew that he wasn't going to win the award overall. So that's the one thing there. And I was a bit surprised that that Josh Allen won MVP. I thought, you can make great arguments for Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen both winning the award, but personally, I thought that award should have went to Lamar Jackson, and there's obviously a lot of pushback coming out of when it came to the All Pro award. How come the All Pro didn't match up with the league MVP award and all like that? So, look, if you look at the list of 50 voters, I don't know how you feel about that, Alex. I mean, I do think it should be a wide swath. I do wonder how qualified some of these 50 people are. To me, it feels like there should be more quote unquote bloggers, higher level bloggers involved in it and all. But I don't know. I think Lamar Jackson got screwed.
I mean, it was a really close vote. I'm not sure. Was this the closest MVP voting? I mean, I guess it's kind of a new system in terms of the points because it's not just about first place votes. It's a couple of years ago, they switched it to kind of a total point system. I know Allen got 27 first place votes, Jackson 23. So that was still even razor thin, 21 total points separated the two. There's no wrong answer here if it's Lamar or Josh Allen. You're right. The All Pro, the fact Lamar got the nod there, but not MVP is a bit curious. I would have given the slight edge to Josh Allen just because I thought Lamar had a little more to work with overall. And I know the voting was sent in before the playoff game, but Buffalo did beat Baltimore. And so that kind of gives me some hindsight edge as well. But really, really close. Could have certainly gone to Lamar, would have been deserving, but I'm okay with Josh Allen winning it.
I was surprised Arthur Smith got a vote for Assistant Coach of the Year, and I think that one came from Ben Volen. And we've had him on the show once or twice, I think, over the years and all. But that was a bit surprising. Danny Smith had two votes?
Yeah, not from me. Would have gotten my vote.
I hear you.
For the record, I'm not. Yeah, it's interesting for the 50 voters. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but there's some interesting, like Tom Brady has a vote. And as a minority owner of the Raiders, should he be voting? There were some with, ties to gambling companies and all that kind of stuff. I just, I'm all for, like you said, casting a wide net of voters, different representation, different roles and contributors. But some of those things are curious.
Do you think there should be more voters or less voters?
I think 50 is a good number. I think like baseball, for example, has hundreds of voters, which feels way too much and just way too widespread. You get some really kind of weird and quirky stuff there. How does Ichiro not become, unanimous 100%, Hall of Famer? So I think 50 is a good number, but I just think, and this kind of leads to a broader discussion to probably have for a different show because we got a lot to talk about today, Dave, but the NFL is really trying to walk this line, getting in the bed with gambling companies and sports betting that has become such a prominent part when 10 years ago it was the dirty word that you couldn't say, couldn't talk about. The closest you would get is this sly Al Michaels reference to a line. Oh, some people are really happy right now, that kind of stuff. And so I think the more the NFL leans into that, we'll talk about people frustrated with the refs and some people think the games are rigged or massaged in some way. the NFL really has to reckon with how they're handling the gambling aspect of things. It's not going to go away, obviously, but that's something new they're dealing with. I don't think they're dealing with all that very well.
Well, I'm old enough to remember Jimmy the Greek on NFL Today and how they tried to dance around that and the lines back in the day there. But yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that the rest of the offseason. And with the Steelers not technically winning any awards, I think we have done enough due diligence in covering that topic for the listeners today.
Sure. I should mention that Joe Burrow won Comeback Player of the Year, just to mention we thought Cam would have been deserving. Again, not a finalist, but Burrow, a two-time winner. And even he said, I don't want to be nominated anymore because that means you're coming off the injury. But Burrow winning the award there, Surtain winning Defensive Player of the Year, Josh Allen winning MVP. Hall of Fame, no Steelers are finalists, so there's not a whole lot to discuss there other than, and I didn't even really know this, Dave, until you brought it up. There's really a new format for the Hall of Fame. I'm still not entirely certain on all the particulars of it, but there's a lot more stipulations, different rules. And so you had a really small Hall of Fame class. I believe the smallest since 2003, I believe, was a tweet that I had read. Only 4 players made it. Luke Kuechly didn't make it. Eli Manning didn't make it. And so from a Pittsburgh standpoint, it's going to be even harder for guys like James Harrison, Hines Ward to get in. I know Marquise Pouncey will be eligible first time for 2026. That seems very difficult for him to get in first ballot, even, a couple ballots after that. And so I don't know if I love this new format, but it's certainly making it a harder path to Canton.
Yeah, look, and I'm going to read off of the Pro Football Hall of Fame site. Where was that paragraph? The selection process. During the selection meeting, the list of 15 finalists was cut to 10, then to 7 before the final vote. In that final vote, a maximum of 5 and minimum of 3 individuals could have been elected to the new class, each needing 80% approval from the selectors who could cast a ballot for 5 of the remaining 7. By reaching the final 7 now, but not getting elected, which obviously falling short of the 80% approval. You've got guys like Anderson, Holt, Kuechly, Vinatieri will advance automatically to the finalist stage for the class of 2026 under the Hall of Fame's bylaws for the selection process. So I don't. My main takeaway is just what you said and what Matthew Marksey, I believe, wrote about now, and it was already in our eyes. We've talked about this for quite a while. Going to be hard for guys like Hines Ward and James Harrison to get in, and it feels like definitely now it's going to be much harder. And technically, you only had one wide receiver get in this time, and that was Sterling Sharp, right? And
through the senior committee, right?
Right.
Not even the modern era.
Right. So you still have that quote unquote log jam of the Torrey Holts, of the Steve Smiths, Reggie Wayne. Oh,
and
Lord.
Fitzgerald's going to be first ballot next year, and he's definitely going to be getting in well before Hines Ward.
Right. So, I mean, it feels like a guy like Hines Ward's going to get caught, remain in this log jam for quite a while now. And I mean, we tried to warn the people about this, right? And now with the selection process, if it stays as is, and it'll be interesting, there's going to be a lot of discussion about this as the weekend goes on, and this is made the actual process and the changing of it comes more to light. There's going to be a lot. Are we going to see smarter classes and all? And look, I think one of the talking points out of this, and myself included, I kind of thought it was more of a given that Eli Manning would have got in this time. Now, look, we can have the conversation of should he and qualified and all that, but the guy did win a couple of Super Bowls and beat the Patriots, and obviously the last name Manning, everything that comes along with that, it kind of felt like he was going to be in this and in this class, and obviously wasn't. And it does make you kind of wonder, what does this do to once Ben Roethlisberger becomes eligible, and along with this new voting process, along with all these other guys that have yet to make it in, that seem like they would have or should have been in. So it's just going to be a lot of talk moving. Do I think Ben Roethlisberger is going to get in at some point? Absolutely. Do I think Ben Roethlisberger is a first ballot guy? Yeah, I do. But it does make you kind of wonder with this new selection process and all like that. And specifically when it comes to guys like borderliners like Hines Ward and James Harrison. Will James Harrison ever get in? Will Hines Ward, could 15 years from now we still be talking about Hines Ward trying to get in?
Possibly. I've been on the record. I don't think he'll get in through the modern era path that he's been on, a consistent semifinalist, never getting over that hump. I thought senior committee might be his best way to get in. I'm even less sure of that right now, given the higher bar and the smaller classes in general. I mean, Sharp did get in that way, I believe, so maybe that gives some bit of hope, but I think you can't expect either of those guys to get in. I think everyone's odds get hurt by this new process the hall has come up with for whatever reason. So, Ben's eligible in 2027. I still think he'll get in first ballot. He certainly will get in at some point. I think he's got a stronger resume in case than Eli. I think he will be first ballot, but the odds are not helped by this process. So, am I understanding this correctly, Dave? The finalists who were not selected for the hall this year, so Kuechly, Vinatieri, etc., they're automatically going to be finalists for next year's class?
Yeah, that's what it says here on the Pro Football Hall of Fame website. Anderson, Holt, Kuechly, and Vinatieri will advance automatically to the finalist stage, and it says 15 remaining in parentheses for the class of 2026 under the Hall of Fame's bylaws for the selection process. So those guys will automatically be included in the finalist stage next year.
So that'll shrink the number of names that can get picked. So there's 15 others that can get picked for the finalists for next year, though.
If this is worded, it's got 15 remaining in parentheses there, so that's the way I take it.
Okay, but that shrinks the pool a little bit, and next year's class is headlined by Larry Fitzgerald. Who else is there? Drew Brees, I believe, Jason Witten. And so you think those guys are all going to have really good odds of being finalists, along with the finalist carryovers and all the other guys that were semifinalists that just missed out this year. So I think the next Hall of Famer we'll see will be Ben. I think it'll be in 2027, but it's not going to be Harrison. It's not going to be Ward. Pouncey maybe someday, but Faneca had to wait a long time, and Faneca had a stronger resume than Pouncey. So I think he'll be waiting on him if he ever does get in. I think it's Ben. We'll see what happens with AB. That's a whole nother can of worms, but I think it's Ben, and I think that's it for a while.
Is there just Hall of Fame fatigue right now, overall during based on the longevity of the league and some of the quote unquote maybe questionable kind of, and you go back to the 100-year and all and all those Bill Cowher would if they didn't have that expanded class and all, would Bill Cowher even be in?
It's a great question. You're right. That Centennial class put in a bunch of people that year, including Cowher. And so if that didn't exist, if that didn't happen, that may be the reason why the NFL is trying to make it harder for these guys to get in. Maybe they feel like the rules are a little too lax and some guys that are more borderline are getting in, and it might be watering down the sanctity, I guess, of the Hall of Fame. I'm not entirely sure the motivation. I can see the angle of that. You want the Hall of Fame to be the true best of the best. That's what it's supposed to be. But point is, under this new format, it seems like there'll be smaller classes, a higher bar, and just harder for everyone to get selected.
Yeah, it feels like there's some fatigue, especially from the Centennial class at this point now as well too. And I would imagine that unless they change these bylaws, once again, there's going to be a lot of talk about this the rest of the weekend. So we don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Obviously, no Steelers are getting enshrined this year, and even the two eligible guys next year in Pouncey and DeCastro, I wouldn't expect anything to come of that. most definitely there. So it does feel like the next one we will be talking about at some point will be Ben Roethlisberger.
Agreed. All right, Dave, let's talk quarterback. And I barely know where to begin with everything quarterback reports that have gone on this week. I feel like the more we hear, the less we know and the kind of more static we get. But here are the big picture things that have happened over the last couple of days. Jay Glazer speaking with Pro Football Talk in one of those Super Bowl Radio Row interviews said very confidently that he expects Russell Wilson to not return to Pittsburgh. He says, you'll see a new start for Russell. He does not think it's happening in terms of return to Pittsburgh. And of course, Glazer, who's just a strong NFL insider in general, but we know he's as close with Mike Tomlin as anybody, even referenced recently texting with Mike Tomlin in that interview with PFT. And so that's his belief about Russ. There's been counter reporting, even from Steelers.com's own Dale Lawley, that says no decision has been made. Russ nor Fields have been ruled out. Pittsburgh has not made up their mind anything free agent, quarterback related yet. And so there's that report. We knew about Jerry Dulac report earlier this week that said that Arthur Smith effectively took away control from Russell Wilson, didn't give him the freedom that he had early in the season. That was rebutted or rebutted, I should say, by Aditi Kinkhabwala. Very clearly, she said that was wrong. It was coming from Wilson's camp. There's a lot going on here, Dave. We're not a whole lot closer to figuring out who this team's quarterback will be in 2025. Even Glazer said that he doesn't think the team knows who their quarterback will be, even downplayed the odds of Justin Fields being the guy. So I'm just throwing a lot at you and making you catch it here, Dave, and try to run with it. But what is happening at quarterback?
Well, first and foremost, now they seem to have a beat writers on like 93.7 like every day now, and the topic keeps getting asked, and it seems like some of the responses they forget what they said the previous time or what they you know it sounds like nobody really knows for sure. That they're just saying things overall. At its core, at this point in the offseason right now, I mean, heck, we haven't even had the Super Bowl yet. The Steelers obviously just got back from the All-Star game tours and all like that. I at my core, at my gut tells me they still don't have 100% idea themselves of what's going to happen yet. And once again, I think you've got beat writers on both sides. Somebody's going to be right, somebody's going to be wrong, and there's a slim chance that maybe even both of these guys might not be back here. I just think this is just because they're, technically you only have one under contract in Skylar Thompson right now, as far as that quarterback room goes right now. And because of the rarity of the Steelers not having a quarterback, a carryover under contract from the previous season, has kind of led to this glut of it just being topical and the easy thing to talk about, speculate about at this time. Now, at its core, the common sense, the tea leaves, I think, would lead you to believe that Justin Fields would be more in the driver's seat. But I mean, would I bet my house either way right now of Justin Fields or Russell Wilson? No, I would not. And really, at its core, I don't really think the Steelers can affirmatively say right now who they know who the quarterback will be. And then, Matthew Stafford's name seems to get thrown around more and more by the day. I think Albert Breer was on with Dan Patrick on Dan Patrick's show, and we came across that last night. I think wrote about it maybe today. There are some people that kind of wondering if Matthew Stafford will indeed be traded this offseason, and if he is, would the Steelers be interested in going down that route?
Right. Breer wasn't reporting it, but he was making the case about why a team like Pittsburgh would and should have interest in a Matthew Stafford to try to capitalize on the window of an aging defense before TJ Watt and Cam Heyward and Minka Fitzpatrick are past their prime or no longer playing in the NFL. I don't mean to ask this in a leading question. I really am trying to ask it open-ended. Are you concerned that we don't seem to have any more clarity about who Pittsburgh intends to make their quarterback of 2025? It is still the first week of February. We're still 5 weeks away from the start of free agency, but is it concerning that we don't appear to be any closer to knowing the answer than we were 1 month ago when the season ended?
Based on the calendar and an overarching answer to your question, no. The only thing I will say is, boy, it was quite curious that the Steelers got themselves into this position to begin with, where there is the where they had the uncertainty of what this room, because this was kind of uncharted territory of not having at least somebody in that room under contract of your top, let's say, 2 or 3 guys that you had in that room. So they are in this situation for their own doing. But based on where the calendar is at this time, and based on the fact that, 2 of your most, like it or not, most notable free agent quarterbacks that, at this point in time, who are scheduled to be unrestricted guys, because of the rest of the group, are Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. There's still a lot of negotiation to be worked out. These guys are also going to look probably at least up until the through the tampering period, unless their doors are just blown off with an offer. They're probably would be silly to sign at this point. So at its core, am I concerned that we don't have more clarity? No. But in the same breath, I will say the Steelers are they get what they get for being in this position, for not having anybody under contract for 2025 at this time.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, it's less about concern about the fact that neither have signed. I wouldn't expect that. Still so kind of early in this process. I think, again, that'll come between post-combine and pre-tampering period, but just all the back and forth. And reports, if you believe him, and you take all this with a grain of salt, but reports are the team is divided. That came from Ray Fittipaldo, that they're split on, should it be Russ or should it be Fields? Is that the concern, that the team just truly seems to not know who they want as their quarterback?
I think they have an idea maybe who they want. It's just a matter of, do they think they can get something done, and might something better in their eyes become available, through either a trade or somebody get cut or something along those lines. So once again, I'm more in the camp of, I think they know who, a couple of paths at this point that they hope to go down. But I don't think we're close to having any sort of an announcement that, Justin's been re-signed or Russ has been re-signed or what have you. So I think this is going to roll on into, closer to the start of the new league year, closer to the tampering period at Combine. And I fully expect that when Omar Khan hits the podium in Indianapolis, that we're still not going to have an answer.
Agreed. Should we be considering the external names more than we are? I mean, Art Rooney's comment, the one thing you can say from the team is that Art Rooney said his preference was for one of Russ or Fields to return. But should we consider Matthew Stafford more? Should we even consider, and I've been thinking about this a little bit more lately, Dave, trading up for a quarterback this year? We've talked so much about that is the path, at least I have. That is where Pittsburgh has to go. I know it's not a good quarterback class this year, but there are names. There just aren't many names. There's Cam Ward. There's Shadur Sanders. I don't know how Pittsburgh feels about either of them, but if one of those guys were to slip, I mean, if the whole thought is they're going to have to make a move for a quarterback at some point, that is a possibility for this year.
Well, I think the biggest point that Albert Breer made during his talk with Dan Patrick was the fact that, man, if you're wanting to, with some of these core guys that you have, specifically on a defense with Cameron Heyward and TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick, and the deals that you have them signed to and their age and things like that. If you're wanting to make a serious run at a Super Bowl in 2025, I think we're both kind of agreed that there'll be pause for concern if the quarterback's either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Does a guy like Matthew Stafford at least give you a better chance at having the quote unquote franchise quarterback? Now, look, it doesn't line up with some of the things Mike Tomlin talking about quarterback mobility and all. Like, even though Matthew Stafford can move okay for a guy his age, you don't think of quarterback mobility in Matthew Stafford, right? you think of traditional pocket passer, a guy that can push the football down the field, guy that's got experience and all like that. But if you want to look at it as how serious of a chance, if you put the quarterback mobility aside and assuming that maybe you get one more good year out of Matthew. Look, this guy was one win away from uh being in the NFC championship game, right?
Right.
You know, so and the fact that they did it, and look, everybody had left the Rams for dead ahead of the trade deadline and all like that. So I think the most interesting aspect when it comes to Matthew Stafford would be, look, and one thing that Brewer also said, I hate to get long winded here, but the only reason he would be out with the Rams is because he wants that contract readjusted. He wants to be back in that $50 million range, and you're not going to get that done. You're going to have to spend some money. You're going to have to sign this guy if you traded for him, you're going to have to give him a contract for at least something that you're willing to dedicate probably at least the next 2 seasons to, right? To trade for him and get him financially secure where it meets the needs that he wants and all like that going into whatever he has left. So it feels like long story short, it feels like if you went down the route of a Matthew Stafford, you're going to have to put the quarterback mobility thing aside. And then on top of it, you're going to have to almost be all in on Matthew Stafford for at least 2025 and 2026. But in the same breath, do you owe that to guys like Cameron Heyward, to TJ Watt, to Mika Fitzpatrick, to these core guys? Do you owe it to them to explore that aspect of potentially going after a guy like Matthew Stafford, if indeed he even is available on the market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that certainly would be the argument to pursue Stafford, is to capitalize on this window, because this defense will not be the pillars that exist today. That won't exist for too much longer. But today is literally Matthew Stafford's 37th birthday. He's 37 years old today, and yes, obviously, if you add Stafford, you're a better team. You're a team that certainly can and really be expected to win at least the playoff game. Are you a Super Bowl contender, though? Are you the favorites over Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and even Joe Burrow? I don't know if you're there. You're a better team. You're a more contending type of team, no question. But for how long will that be? And are you even truly an A-tier type of team at that point?
I think it'd be curious to the listenership and the fan base of which of those 3 quarterbacks would they trying to take the fan glasses off, which one they would give the team the best chance at the AFC North alone.
Well, I think it's Stafford. I think Stafford is easily the best quarterback of the 3.
Right.
I think there's little debate about that, but it's for how much longer will he continue being a really good quarterback? And are you in a position, I think some people will say the frustration is Pittsburgh keeps trying to go all in and just say, this is the year. And they just can't reset. They can't find that long-term young quarterback option the way they found with, Bradshaw and Ben. And that should be the mode that they take.
I mean, you agree though that if something were to materialize with this Matthew Stafford stuff, it would have to be probably at least a 2-year commitment, or at least, at least dump a lot of money at him, and then if you did tank out for whatever reason, went 6 or 11, you'd say, okay, fine, we got to this point anyway. We'll just cut bait and throw that money, down the well, so to speak, and go get us a quarterback in the draft that way, But I mean, long story short, I just don't think that you can go a 1 year all in on Matthew Stafford without serious financial commitment.
No, it'll be a multi-year situation. The commitment is less about Pittsburgh's commitment and what is Stafford's commitment? What is his plan? How much longer does he intend to play for? He's eagerly coming back in 2025. I don't know what his plans are, but what is his vision? Does he want to play into his 40s? Is he going year to year? Because if this is a year-to-year thing, then you're really risking it all. You're really truly going all in if you're Pittsburgh, and there's a consequence to that. So
right.
The commitment is more about what does Stafford's future look like, more so than what kind of contract Stafford will get in a deal from Pittsburgh, or even if he stays with the Rams.
Do you think Stafford's And what would the Rams even do this coming year if they didn't have Stafford?
Right. Yeah. What is the incentive? But the question would be if there's a contract impasse, then they just have to deal him because they can't get a contract done. Stafford's not playing for the money he's currently owed. But yeah, the Rams are, like you said, they almost made the NFC title game last year. If they trade Stafford, they have no options at quarterback. They're going to regress. So what is the incentive for the Rams to even do it is a really fair point.
Right. And look, we 4 or 5 weeks from now, we can look back at us even talking about Matthew Stafford and say, can you believe we even talked about Matt? My heart of hearts just thinks that they're going to figure something out with Stafford, the Rams.
Same. Yeah, because there's incentive for Stafford to stay, to win and compete there, and there's incentive for the Rams to keep Matthew Stafford. So when those things typically align, something gets done. But I think Brewer talked about it was a tough negotiation last year, another year older. We'll see. But maybe we should at least entertain the idea of outside forces and options more to at least
until they're
that
not.
discussion we're having
Right.
now. Yeah, until they're not. Yeah, until they're
Right.
not.
Okay.
So, any thought to the pushback from the Dulac reporting about Arthur Smith taking away control? Kinkabala said that it basically was false. It wasn't true. That's Wilson's camp trying to spin the collapse to the season. My thought is neither of us know. The truth is usually somewhere in between. Both those guys and the whole team wears a 5-game losing streak, a historic collapse. And so, to me, the story's almost gotten a little gossipy more so than actual substance. And the truth of, who's to blame here is probably somewhere in the middle.
I mean, you got so many people on each side of it at this time, and it's just it feels just like I said the other day, just and nothing's going to change anything at this point. It's just a matter of people feeling better about maybe where to place the blame where it comes to maybe specifically the Arthur Smith Russell Wilson dynamic. How much of this is planted by Russ, if any? It just all feels messy. We don't have enough info. Once again, I go back to what I said the other day. I just wish Dulac had offered up more context, and maybe he will at some point. But it does feel like just the flavor of the 24 hours of beat writers trying to push back on each other.
Mm-hmm. And I will just say the inference that Wilson's camp is trying to spin this and put it on the coaches in order to make himself look better to help retain his value. I'm not sure how that helps him come back to Pittsburgh if there's reports that throw the coaches under the bus and they feel like they're unfairly put in the spotlight about why the season went belly up. And so I don't even know what Russ would be gaining from that if his intention is to truly return to Pittsburgh. So those are the reports. We put them out there. People can interpret and believe what they prefer to believe. Let me just put a bow on the quarterback discussion, Dave. Just a guess. If you had to guess right now, who is Pittsburgh's quarterback in 2025 for week 1?
Justin Fields right now is where my gut tells me right now.
Same. I will stick with Fields. That was my thought. Postseason, all this back and forth reporting kind of has us feeling like we're stuck in place based on the reporting, ping-ponging back and forth. I will stay where I started with Justin Fields as this team's quarterback week 1.
I'm fatigued by it already, just by the who's to blame for the Arthur Smith stuff, who's like I said, almost every 24 hours. Well, they're leaning this way, or they're undecided, or no, they haven't. I'm fatigued by it by now already, and we'll know within a month and two weeks, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. And I do. Last point. I mean, I will say that Glazer's reporting to me carries the most weight, just because we know that he's as plugged in with Mike Tomlin as anybody. And again, even putting Tomlin connections aside, it's just a really reliable insider. And so when he says, I don't think that's going to happen with Russ returning, and you're going to see a fresh start for Russ. And by the way, Glazer said there's basically no chance he goes back to Pete Carroll with the Raiders. He didn't specify why, but he said there's basically no way that's going to happen. So I'm gonna trust that a little more than the other reporting, and combine that with what Art Rooney had to say about bringing back one of Fields. If it's not Russ, then you're left with Fields, and that's where I think this team goes. All right, Dave, I think we'll take a pause here and come back with our Senior Bowl roundtable with Ross McCorkle and Jonathan Heitrader from their week down in Mobile last week. Ephraim Geller did attend. He was unable to make the podcast today. But we'll come back with Ross and Jonathan. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. As we said, top of the show after the Shrine Bowl Roundtable on Wednesday, we have the Senior Bowl crew that were down in Mobile, Alabama this past week for the 2025 Senior Bowl, where Pittsburgh always a big-time presence, including Mike Tomlin. Also big-time presences are Ross McCorkle and Jonathan Heitritter. They, along with Ephraim Geller, was down there in Mobile. Ephraim is not able to join today, so it'll just be Ross and Jonathan, but really happy to have those guys on. How you guys doing?
Doing great. It was another great year in Mobile, one of my favorite stops of the year. And yeah, like you said, Jonathan and I have been down there together for 3 straight years now. And so we got a kind of a good system worked out. And I think it was my most productive year down there. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, likewise. It's my 4th year down at Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So it's kind of crazy how, over the years you get to evaluate classes, compare previous classes to this class. And yeah, it's definitely cool where it's like you can just plan on that being an annual stop every year. So looking forward to talking about it.
I started off the Shrine Bowl conversation, and I'll ask the Senior Bowl crew the same way. Who are the biggest names down there? A lot of guys withdraw, even putting aside who is specific for Pittsburgh needs or who could be in the realm of possibility at 21. Just, Jonathan, I'll start with you. Who were the top prospects who participated fully down at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, so with the top prospects that were down there, I think the big name that, a lot of people will find kind of polarizing in this class, but it's going to draw a lot of headlines was quarterback Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Just coming off the season, like you have guys like Cam Ward and Sador Sanders kind of sitting at the top of that quarterback class. And then like Milroe has often been projected based off of whatever rankings you see to kind of be in that next bucket. But just based off of how he finished the season, especially with not a great performance against Michigan, just the questions of like, oh, how can he hold up as a passer versus just being an athletic quarterback who can make things happen with his legs. He was definitely a guy that was going to be drawing a lot of attention down in Mobile just to see how he held up in 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 practices with his accuracy. Other guys that kind of stuck out to me was just the wealth of talent coming from the Ole Miss defensive line, guys like Jared Ivey, Princely Ulamalian, Walter Nolan, all guys that are projected to be anywhere in that like 20 to 45, 50 range. And you just have 3 guys all coming in that same class. So just evaluating like what their position fits are, kind of like how they all stack up against each other in those different O-line, D-line drills. Those are a couple guys that just stuck out to me.
Ross, let's kind of stick with quarterback since Jonathan mentioned Milroe. Talk about the impression you had of Milroe. Seemed like a bumpy week that showed the good and the bad, the volatility in his game. The other quarterbacks to Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, others. What was your impression of the quarterback group down there?
Yeah, Milroe, I watched quarterbacks on the second day, but I couldn't help but continuously notice Milroe just missing, wildly missing, either overthrowing or underthrowing on the first day of practice. I think at one point he had something like, I think it was like 9 or 10 straight incompletions. He just wasn't on target. It was a little bit rough. Now, by the second day, when I was kind of more closely watching the quarterbacks, it started out rough, and he kind of finished the practice strong. He had a couple of deep completions that day. One that was back shoulder that was well placed, and one that was kind of dropping it in the bucket on a go route in the back of the end zone there. And so I think he, looked better, and I think the consensus was, you were looking for him to kind of progress throughout the week. It's a tough situation for quarterbacks in Mobile, just because, everybody's learning new plays. There's not a lot of chemistry with your receivers, stuff like that. And so you do look for the guys to get better. I think overall Milroe did progress, but it was still overall, I would say, very rough, and didn't make me have a better impression of him coming out than I did going in. So in terms of Oregon's Dylan Gabriel, he's somebody that, I think he's probably the most polished of the group. And that was probably the case coming in. So no big surprise there. I mean, he's the all-time touchdown scorer in college football. I think he had 188 touchdowns, including 33 rushing throughout his career. He played at multiple different schools, and he actually had a helmet on that showed all 3 schools that he played for. So he was kind of repping all 3 of his programs, which was cool. But he my big issue with him, other than, him being like 5'10" or whatever, pretty short overall, is the fact that it seemed like it took forever for the ball to come out of his hands at times. And that might be a product of his height because he can't see over the line as well. It just seemed like even in the 7-on-7 sessions, we're talking about 5.5 seconds before the ball was coming out, and in 7-on-7s with no pressure. And, that should be an environment where the ball should come out relatively quick, and it wasn't. But he was placing the ball well in terms of leading his receivers. He was the most accurate of the group by far. I think overall, the first day he was probably the strongest. Second day, he kind of maybe took a little step back, but overall, I would say he was solid. In terms of Jackson Dart, I didn't have a crazy impression of him either way. Really, it wasn't somebody that was standing out to me. It wasn't somebody that was standing out negatively either. So I think the ball was coming out of his hands well. His accuracy was okay. He was on time for the most part. But it wasn't. I think in your scouting report, you said he's kind of a date and not marry guy, and that's. I think that was a kind of an accurate summation of how I felt about him while watching. Though there was a good amount of buzz, and I'm sure Jonathan watched him a different day than I did. Maybe he stood out a little more then. I think some of the lesser known guys like Louisville's Tyler Shuck, I think it's pronounced. He actually looked pretty good on day one. I think he was, other than Dylan Gabriel, he was probably the best on day one. His big issue, I guess, in subsequent days that I noticed was he kept his ball placement was a little behind guys. He wasn't really creating opportunities for yards after the catch, and so. But overall, I think Shuck maybe had, relative to expectations, the best week of anybody. So a little bit all over the place for the quarterbacks.
Jonathan, just a quick follow-up, then Dave, you can jump in. Give me your impressions on the quarterbacks and Dart in particular, because like Ross said, there was some buzz, but then also reports saying that none of the quarterbacks, Dart included, really stood out. Just your thoughts on who was the best quarterback there, and also your thoughts on Dart's week.
Yeah, I would say kind of going with Ross, I thought Gabriel stood out in terms of just his overall performance. When you look at just accuracy, consistency, it kind of waned throughout the week, kind of what Ross was saying. And also one thing that kind of stuck out is just how long he was holding on to the ball, which, you might get away in settings like this. But in today's NFL, unless you got a phenomenal offensive line, you're not sitting back there for 4, 5, 6 seconds. So I think overall, he probably had the best week when it came to just consistency of performance. Shuck overall played pretty well, especially just showing that velocity in that 6'5", 225-pound frame, just kind of the prototypical measurements that you look for in a quarterback. Honestly, having been there a few years now, I thought it was kind of underwhelming, the performance of the quarterbacks, just kind of seeing compared to years past. I don't really see a guy that I would grade out as a first-round guy at all. I would say, maybe you can consider some of these guys on day 2, but it's one of those things where you're definitely looking to have this guy come in and either be a developmental player that, sits for a year or, takes some time to learn from a veteran, or is probably one of those guys that, come in as more of a backup and develops more into a spot starter.
Obviously, the Steelers supposedly meet with all these players down in Mobile in some shape, form, or fashion. As far as on-field stuff, did any Steelers personnel seem to spend much time at all with the quarterbacks from what you saw on the field?
Personally, from what I was seeing, I didn't see a whole lot. I mean, every time we were looking for Tomlin, he was basically just had his eyes all over the defensive line. It was literally just on top of them basically almost the entire week. So when it came to other personnel, it didn't really seem that way. Again, when I interviewed Milroe at the end, he said obviously he had a conversation with Tomlin. It would sound like they really enjoyed each other's company, but that was behind closed doors. I didn't really see those two interacting or with other Steelers personnel interacting during the practices per se. So that's a kind of a tough question to answer because obviously they meet with them, but I didn't really see anything happening on the field now.
All right. As we stated Alex and I stated going into this and came wasn't surprised to see Mike Tomlin with his head pretty much buried in the interior defensive line group, especially down at Mobile. This year's draft is probably, and I can't even think back to the last time I was this excited about defensive linemen, especially when it comes to what the Steelers look for, measurements and all like that. Was and both of you can take this, who were the top three, and that's probably hard because this is such a good group down there. Walter Nolan was a guy that I immediately went to, was one of the first players that I studied really deep when it comes to this class. Looked and sound like he had a good week down in Mobile. Was he the top, the interior defensive lineman down there? Who, talk about maybe the top three, especially when it comes to Steelers fit. Ross, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think as Jonathan mentioned earlier, I think all those Ole Miss guys represented themselves well. Nolan certainly has a great blend of both, speed and power, and I don't even know if he's going to make it to the Steelers. He had a very good week. I've heard some people talking about kind of top 10 buzz for the guy. I guess we'll see. It's one of those classes where I think there's a whole bunch of guys that could kind of be in that conversation. So obviously some people get pushed down. He was quick, first step, Nolan, that is. I think my eyes were kind of drawn to his teammate, Jared Ivey, and I did his scouting report for the site. He has very active hands. I think his measurements ended up coming in. He was 6'0", 283 with 33 and 3/4 inch arms. And so, maybe a tad bit light for what you'd like for the Steelers, but kind of within that range. And if you look at, just talking to him at the media lunch, and I think Jonathan spoke with him more extensively, he looks more like a interior guy, although at Ole Miss they had him playing edge in 2024. In 2023, he primarily played kind of inside, mostly 5-tech, and I think he even had 3-tech, kind of all over the defensive line experience at Ole Miss. And so that's a guy that I have my eyes on. He's very athletic. He's explosive. He's got his hands are maybe the best of anyone that I saw down there. He just has a variety of moves that he uses, and he does look like he could probably add some weight. Maybe a less heralded guy that could be interesting to the Steelers is Iowa's Yaya Black. He's a guy that, maybe they could bring in if the Steelers were to double dip along the defensive line, which I know is kind of becoming a more popular opinion these days. He's a guy that they can maybe look at in the late rounds to come in and compete against his former teammate, Logan Lee, mostly because he just has the kind of ideal size, length kind of profile. He's 6'5", 337 with 35-inch arms. If you could get him to shed just a little bit of weight, he's kind of, exactly what you want in terms of the length and stuff. And he wasn't great in the one-on-ones. I'm not going to fluff him up too much, but the team sessions, I thought he was represented himself better in the team sessions. He was anchoring against the run pretty well. At one point, he had a double team that he completely just stonewalled. There was zero movement. So he has power. He has the length. I think he just needs to put it together. So he's an interesting guy to me. Who else? There's Jamari Caldwell was another big standout, I think, of the week. He wasn't really super heralded coming in. Oregon defensive tackle. He's a guy that told me he wants to lose about 20 pounds before his first NFL season. I think he's 343 or something like that right now. And at that size, his burst was absolutely insane. He was like teleporting into the backfield at times, just running right by guys. His get off was great. So, very intriguing to me just at that size. And if he's able to shed that weight and become even more athletic, that's going to be a problem. He bases his game on power, but he certainly has the speed as well. Who else is there? There's Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. He's another guy, super quick get off. Maybe not a huge variety of pass rush moves, but what he does works, and his get off is difficult for these offensive linemen to deal with. He was just absolutely bullying people in the one-on-ones, running right by them at times.
One guy that really stood out to me was Darius Alexander from Toledo.
Yeah, Jonathan, talk about Darius Alexander and Deion Walker out of Kentucky.
Oh yeah. So one, I was gonna say like Darius Alexander definitely stood out to me as a guy that just was like probably not as heralded, kind of being like a day three kind of become process, but he definitely flashed like relative to his size. So I really enjoyed seeing his like production and just being able to get into backfields, being very productive against the run. He seemed like an energizer running on the field. Just overall did really well in that facet. Dion Walker from Kentucky, he just look is definitely winning the competition for off the bus, just being this like 6'7", 345-pound like monster. He just stood like a head above everybody at the Senior Bowl. So it was pretty easy to see him. But honestly, I wasn't very impressed with his actual play during the game. He didn't play with a whole lot of leverage. You see that in his tape. He pops up a lot. He stands upright, and he doesn't play to the strength and the power that he naturally has. There's a couple times where he ended up on the ground just because he was like leaning into players and not being able to actually use leverage and use his strength. So he was a guy that was kind of underwhelming for me relative to like the expectations, and especially from what he had based off of his sophomore tape. So I definitely don't think that he was like a winner. I think he was more of a loser in this process.
I would compare him to kind of a little bit more refined Daniel McCullers, at least in the 2024 tape. Did not get a chance to watch. Supposedly his Deion Walker's 2023 tape was better than his 2024 tape. I came away just mostly from the 2024 tape with just of a very inconsistent player when it comes to Walker. And once again, I kind of viewed him as kind of a little bit more refined Daniel McCullers. Is that kind of where you're at on Walker?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he has a lot of athleticism that like considering his size. So I think he's like technically more of an athletic player. Like, I mean, he played anywhere from like nose tackle to like almost like wide nine on the edge. It's kind of crazy when you watch that tape and his movement at that size. But he kind of comes off a little stiff. He doesn't look very like fluid in that motion. And again, I think the big thing is just working on that core strength and making sure that he doesn't pop up right away, because his leverage, just because he's so big, and he admitted to that me in the interview that we did with him, that he just needs to work on playing with better leverage. And it just looks like his motor runs hot and cold. So McCullers is a good comp when it comes to like overall size and measurements. I would say he's kind of like, he probably has a little bit more athleticism for that, but at the same time, like I would say the effectiveness compared to McCullers is very like comparable, just because for his size, for his measurements, for his athletic ability, he should be more productive than he actually is.
And what about Savion Jones out of LSU? They have him listed as I guess technically an edge, but 6'5", 1'8", 289, big hands, 10 and 1/8, arms 33 and a half. Did they have him playing more interior or off the edge? What kind of week did Jones have down there?
He was a disruptive player more than productive, but he was one of those guys that you could definitely see that he's kind of a rugged throwback guy, very strong at the point of attack, holds himself well against the run. He uses a lot more power in his pass rush. I think I saw him primarily playing the edge. Ross, you can kind of chime in as well too, but I think he was more of an edge guy compared to playing more inside.
Yeah, he was more playing on the outside there for the most part, but obviously he was the big standout of the actual game itself. Every time you looked over, he was in the backfield making plays. So, yeah, he didn't really stand out to me during the week of practice as much, but certainly in the game, it made you look back and be like, what was I missing? So, yeah, he's an intriguing guy, and he's another. There's a lot of those guys in this defensive line class that are just like, could they maybe play 5 tech and slide inside? Their measurements kind of look like it, but most of their experience isn't, kind of inside. It's out on the edge. Some of the guys came in like Landon Jackson, way too thin. Certainly won't be able to. Some of the guys like Savion Jones and like Jared Ivey probably could. So I don't know if any of us got a chance to speak to Jones, but that'll be somebody I'll be targeting at the combine for sure.
Do you think most teams will look at Jones as more as a 4-3 base end, rush end?
I mean, yeah, given his experience, that probably makes the most sense. But I mean, he came in at 289, 33 and a half arms. I mean, he has the size to kind of play. Well, I mean, I know it was kind of a while ago, and people have gotten bigger and stuff. But what was Heyward coming out? Is not too far off from what Jones is there, I think. So, I think there's potential for him to play 3-4, kind of 5 tech.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, you just wonder and it's just a catch-all comparison, but the Marvin Leal, what do you do with him? Is he an edge? Is he a down lineman? And so you just wonder Pittsburgh will be considering that this time around. Let's go to the other big position and need for Pittsburgh, wide receiver. Ross, I'll go back to you. Who were some of the receivers that stood out? I know Jack Beck had the big week and obviously the feel-good story in the sense of catching the game-winning touchdown pass, Senior Bowl MVP after losing his brother in those New Orleans terrorist attacks just over a month ago. So sounds like he really helped himself from a draft stock standpoint. Also, any buzz on Jalen Royals from Utah State? Just did a report on him up on the site on Friday. I didn't hear much about him, but I might have missed it down there at Mobile.
I didn't personally have a ton of notes on Royals, but looking back through coverage in general, I think people are pretty high on him. I think there was a couple other Jalen's, but Jalen Knoll was one of the big standouts to me this week. That week was Iowa State's Jalen Knoll. He's a smaller guy. I think he's 5'10", that kind of neighborhood. He played mostly in the slot in college, but they actually had him on the outside primarily at the Senior Bowl, and he told me I'm more than just a slot when I talked to him, and I think he kind of proved that. He can run pretty much every route you want him to run because he played in the slot. He's got a good. He's good at kind of running over the middle and dealing with feeling out zones and stuff like that. I think he had strong hands. He's speedy. I think there was kind of a theme this week with the receivers and their release packages. A lot of guys were just doing way too much dancing, stuff that might work in one-on-ones against DBs, but not super practical in a game because you're wasting a lot of time. I think Noel was one of the few kind of really good release package guys. He was getting off the line well. Very fluid mover, great hands. So he was one of the big standouts to me. I think Georgia's Arian Smith was somebody that I think was catching a lot of flack for not really having the greatest hands at Georgia. But he made probably 2 of my favorite catches of the week in Mobile. I think he probably answered at least some questions about that. I'd have to go back. I think I'm about to do his scouting report, but I'm interested to look back and see exactly what was the issue with his hands there, because it did not look like that in Mobile. He's an interesting guy. Arkansas's Isaac Tesla, kind of the same thing. Not a super talked about guy coming into the week, but he was making some tough catches, some kind of contested 50-50, high pointing the ball kind of catches. Washington State's Kyle Williams, he was a guy who was probably separating better than anybody other than maybe Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson's another guy who's, super undersized. I mean, we're talking about he makes Tank Dell look like a heavyweight. And so he was obviously separating a lot and was doing a good job at that. But you have questions about how he's going to hold up at the next level.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would be the lightest player since Tutu Atwell. That would be drafted or something like that. So those are some of the names that stuck out to me.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'll go to you just to get your thoughts on the receiver position. Was going to mention Tej Johnson, a lot of buzz, a lot of Tutu Atwell comparisons, but is severely undersized. What about Ty Felton from Maryland, Jaden Higgins, Restrepo from the U? Any other guys stand out that Ross did not mention?
Yeah, when it comes to the receivers, I definitely kind of gravitated toward Ty Felton just because of the season that he had and wanted to research him a little bit more. He definitely did well in some one-on-one sessions. He wasn't as noticeable in team, but definitely that guy that has become more refined of a route runner, can be able to separate, has some good release packages. So definitely kind of a more mid-round / day 3 guy that kind of stood out. There was points in time where Higgins did kind of show his height and his size, especially making catches along the sideline. But overall, I kind of thought he had more of a quiet week compared to his teammate, Noel. So another guy that I really wanted to go into the week that I wanted to watch was Xavier Restrepo from Miami, just a guy that left Miami as their all-time leading receiver in catches, yards, touchdowns. So very prolific receiver. He's really performed well the last 2 years. So I watched him, and there's points in time where you could see his ability to uncover, generate separation, find the soft spots in the zone, but kind of had more of a quiet week compared to the other names that Ross listed. I definitely was a fan of Kyle Williams. I was watching the receivers only one day, and it wasn't until the last day, but the first 2 days, like Williams just continually drawed my eyes because he was continuously just always getting open over the middle of the field, down the field, on short routes. So just that ability to separate in all facets of the game definitely was something that I noted.
All right, who was the top wide receiver based on best all around as far as route running, separation, get off, contested catch, hands? Who was in each of your mind the top wide receiver down there?
I would definitely probably say Jack Beck, just from like obviously the media hyped him up, but I would also just say like he just consistently made plays and was head over heels like more productive and consistent than like all the other receivers on his team, but then even just on the other team as well too. And just you saw his play during the game as well too when he made that jump ball catch and came down with it while being contested. Like he just continuously did that every single day in practice, and that translated over the game. So it's definitely a feel good story. You have to feel good for the guy, especially with everything he's been through. But overall, if you take that out, I do think that he had the strongest week.
Ross?
Yeah, I agree with Besh there. I think overall, probably the strongest week. But if you're looking for more of a separator than kind of a physical guy, I think I'd go back to Jalen Knoll from Iowa State. I think he won Practice Player of the Week. So his DBs on the national team voted him the best player at wide receiver on that team. So, yeah, like I said, I couldn't really find a weak point in his game other than just being a little undersized.
All right, let's talk about offensive linemen and the specifically the kid out of North Dakota State who position flexible. What was his name?
Bray Zabel.
Yeah, Zabel. Seemed like he might be slated for center/guard. Seemed like he had a really strong week. If the Steelers go interior offensive lineman at some point, obviously they don't need a center at this point. They could probably use an interior swing guy, a guy that can play maybe both guard spots and maybe even a little center. Talk about some of the top interior offensive linemen down there.
I think one guy that kind of drew my eye was Jackson Slater out of Sacramento State. They've had a pretty good track record of pulling in Sac State guys. I think it was his name escapes me, the inside linebacker a couple of years ago from Sac State. But anyway, Jackson Slater was really, I think, one of the better standouts. I think, Zabel you guys talked about, but Slater played primarily guard in college, and so he's, battle tested at the guard position. I think he was an All-American at a small school, which tells you something about him. He was, he had the athleticism. I think he told me he prefers to play more in a zone scheme. So he's kind of an interesting guy. It's just, some of these guards that stood out, how high are they going to go? And, guards do tend to slide. But how high are the Steelers going to be looking at guard after how much capital they spent last year? So, my eyes weren't necessarily drawn to the offensive line group just because of that. But I think Slater, Zabel, Frazier was another guy. I think Miles Frazier, kind of a stronger kind of phone booth kind of guy at guard. I was looking forward to watching Tate Ratledge from Georgia, but he unfortunately backed out at the last minute. And so, Jonathan, what about you?
One guy that did stick out to me as another small school guy was Jacob Bayer from Arkansas State. He, along with like Frazier and then Willie Lampkin, who's a very undersized center, I was kind of impressed by him for the most part. But again, just kind of like that size is a concern for Lampkin coming out of North Carolina. But I thought that Bayer really represented himself well. Just like these guys, I'm like, if you've got the helmet, you're going to be like, oh man, like what are these guys going to do in the league, right? But Slater did well. I thought Bayer did well. I think like obviously you said Zabel did really well as well too. He played really well in terms of his movement, being able to make blocks in space, being able to stonewall guys at the line of scrimmage as a pass protector. But one guy that kind of really stuck out to me, and if we are talking about tackles, this guy is probably a guard tackle, like he could go either way, is probably Anthony Belton from North Carolina State. He played primarily tackle, but he's also taken reps at guard. And I thought that, he just had a really standout performance. He was really solid in the pass protection drills and the one-on-ones. He was routinely winning, but then he was also making a really good waves in the team portion as well too. Just doing a great job of being out in front in the run game, making sure that he always got a body on a man. He's a nasty finisher, but also being sound and having good movement skills at like 6'5", 345 pounds. So he has the size to play tackle, but there's a lot of teams just because of his demeanor in the run game that may kick him into guard. So he's that guy that's probably a mid-round guy that if you're looking for like a guard tackle guy that could probably play both, Belton would be my pick of the bunch.
And that was Mapu, right, from Sac State. I think you mentioned earlier there, Ross, one of those small school gyms that the Senior Bowl found a couple years ago. Yeah. Just wanted to tie a bow on that loose thread there. Jonathan mentioned him, and I know that this is not going to be an immediate need for Pittsburgh, but man, I got to hear more about Willie Lampkin because you just don't see a guy of that frame. Legitimately 5'10", 270. That's what he weighed in at, and it sounded like he held his own overall. So, Jonathan, I'll start with you, and Ross, feel free to jump in after, but tell me about this guy, Willie Lampkin.
I honestly loved his tape, and I'm like, okay, like obviously the measurables make him an outlier, and like that makes it really hard to draft him. But I mean, there's this like distinct rep, and it's gone live on like X now, where it's like he stands up Dayon Walker, who weighs like probably 70 pounds more, and yeah, it's just insane just to see like his fight. And you look back on the tape at North Carolina, especially you're watching Omari and Hampton run wild, and it's just like Lampkin's making a lot of those blocks. He just is a fighter. He gets it done. I think he's very productive when it comes to the run game. He does a great job in that perspective of just sealing off defenders, using his strength to his perspective. But then I also think in pass protection, he does a great job with that short leverage to really like sit into his blocks. And you just see him stand up like a 6'7", 45 pound Walker like it's nothing. So overall, very, very impressed with his performance.
Is there any comp for him?
Did he look? Yeah, I was going. Did he look every bit of 5'10", 3'8", 270? I mean, did he look like the kid that didn't belong in the group?
Yeah, Tave, as you would like to say, he might struggle to feed himself a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah, so definitely one of those guys where he's like yeah, as I said with Dayon Walker, he's like above everyone else in the group. He was definitely a head below of everyone else in the group. So definitely looked really small.
Is there any comp for, I was trying to think about like anyone who's remotely been in the NFL at that frame. You're probably not going to find anyone 1-to-1, but I was trying to think about like Jason Poe. I think someone mentioned Nick Harris. Is there any kind of just NFL comparison for this guy?
Trying to think about it. I mean, there was that center a while back that was like a free agent for the Steelers, right? Or whatever, that was super undersized or something like that. And he bounced around the league a little bit. I can't remember. I definitely like the Nick Harris just because he's super small. But yeah, no, Lampkin's a player. Like if you're going based off the tape and the tape don't lie, like he plays well. But again, it's just like those measurables make him an outlier. So it's like you ultimately are taking a chance if you draft him. So if you're going to draft him, you're going to draft him late and just see how he holds up in camp. So.
Yeah, he was one of those late additions to the roster, and I think it was like PFF had him super high up on their board, and a lot of people, just because of that size alone, I think, just had him as a kind of a late round, maybe undrafted kind of guy, and I think he definitely proved he belongs in the draftable conversation in Mobile.
Let me go to safety. Again, not one of those big needs that get talked about a lot, but I think Pittsburgh really should be drafting a safety, add some sort of safety help either in free agency or the draft, given that Monte Casey, free agent, likely to not return, depth behind Minka and Elliott is thin. I know it's not considered a great safety group overall in this year's class, guys, but Ross, I'll start with you. Any safeties stick out to you down there?
It wasn't the most, it wasn't the best group overall. I think a couple of the names, Sebastian Castro out of Iowa, he's kind of, better in man. He's kind of a physical guy. I think he did have an interception on, maybe Milroe was it the day I was watching the cornerback groups, but he's kind of more of a strong safety, I would say.
He's physical. He'll come up and hit tackle too. He had a tackle or two, I think, coming up in the actual game, right?
Yeah. He's absolutely more of a downhill kind of, I guess, Deshaun Elliott, if you will, type of player. So yeah, he stuck out in that regard. It's a little hard to get a read on. Obviously in the game you can see those kinds of guys, but the week isn't necessarily designed to show off your strong safeties all that well.
True.
But in the limited amount I was able to watch of him, he looked good. I think, what was it? Billy Bowman was another guy who looked pretty good overall from Oklahoma. But, undersized, 5'0", 9'6", 198, a little bit of a smaller guy, but he was, he showed off his speed. He was sticky in coverage. He seemed to have a good kind of feel of taking away areas of the field and stuff like that. I think he had a couple of nice pass breakups in the end zone in one of the red zone sessions that I was watching, and so didn't get a super great look at the safety group overall. But those are a couple of the names.
Jonathan, who's going to test probably the best out of this safety group at the combine? If you had to guess.
That's going to be a really hard question to answer. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are very athletic, but again, it's just like to see like that on tape. I don't know if Bowman's going to live up to like being smaller. I don't know if his speed will be great. I don't think Castro's going to test well. Sanker, I believe, from Virginia, also had he had an up and down week from the most part. Like I thought there's points and times where he kind of like struggled in one-on-ones, but then you'd also like rally back and kind of have a couple pass deflections. And during a team session when he was able to just play more of his spot, like I thought he played well. But when it comes to like the best tester, I honestly just need to dive more into this group just because it was kind of underwhelming kind of going into it. So definitely need to have more research into it and just see like who will be a better tester when it comes to the combine.
An interesting name that we didn't talk about there that just popped into my head, that Tulane Caleb Ransaw. He's super like Swiss Army knife kind of guy. I think I saw him play outside, slot. He was playing a little bit of safety. He was a little bit all over the place. And I think even in college, he might have played some off-ball linebacker at times. So he's going to be an interesting one to watch. I think he was making some plays throughout the week. He seems to be kind of a high, IQ kind of guy, quick and fluid mover. So somebody to watch there.
Jonathan, let me ask you about two names. You can talk about them, even just about their season overall game, if not just the Senior Bowl. But Dan Jackson from Georgia, who was named the best safety of that side. And then also anything on Upton, what's his name? Upton Stout from Western Kentucky. Looked like he got some buzz as a potential nickel corner at the NFL level.
Yeah, starting with Stout, I thought like he played well. He was very competitive and feisty. I think he did play a lot of cornerback reps overall when it came to like the slot and just, there was obviously some times where he took some losses. I think his judgment and being able to break on the ball and show that awareness and just kind of have those instincts occasionally waned. But at the same time, like I think he was just very competitive. He was always kind of around the ball, which was great to see. It's crazy because like Dan Jackson, I kind of pointed to Rocks about this. Like he just felt like, especially in one-on-one drills when he was in coverage, he just got freaking like abused when it came to like actual coverage. Like he was just getting burned again and again and again. And he ended up getting up like one, I think, pass deflection in the drills that I watched. But then I think the play that really like had him like get a lot of buzz is like there's this guy that caught a pass and he just drilled him right along the sideline and pushed him out of bounds. And it was kind of like a borderline, like, okay, there may be a penalty on that flag or on that play hit, which, ultimately like he is more of that. He's more of a downhill enforcer, like rugged throwback, like strong safety type for the most part. So again, it's kind of interesting to see him like in totality win like that practice player when in reality, like he did struggle in a lot of different facets of his game. And then he has like one really big play that kind of helped him stand out throughout the day and throughout the performance.
Running back, good year to evidently have a running back. I saw a couple of the major media guys say, look, even if you don't need a running back this year, this is a good class to draft one at some point. I think when it comes to the Steelers and what they traditionally look for as far as the bigger back goes, Devin Neal and Ollie Gordon the second. Devin Neal out of Kansas and Ollie Gordon the second out of Oklahoma State would be two that people are trying to push over into the Steelers corner. Were those two guys the best of the kind of the bigger backs that the Steelers look for down at the Senior Bowl this year?
So certainly coming into the week, I was most excited to watch Ollie Gordon, the second from Oklahoma State. I mean, this is a guy that had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, all-purpose yards in 2023, including over 1,700 on the ground. Very, very productive. And if he would have been draft eligible after that season, we're talking about probably a Ashton Giunti kind of guy in terms of his draft stock. But 2024, totally different story. His tape was not great. Now, some of that's because Oklahoma State just was a bad team this past year. The offensive line was getting him hit at or behind the line of scrimmage at an alarming rate, and he did not deal with it that well. This is a guy I was excited to watch coming into the week, and he, it didn't stand out to me all that much. He came in a little heavier than I expected at, I think, 233, a little bit shorter than expected. So that's probably the opposite direction I was hoping things to go. Maybe a little taller, a little less weight, and he kind of went the wrong direction on both of those scales. I don't think his speed didn't really stand out in the one-on-one kind of running routes against linebackers. Wasn't really standing out. His hands were fine. But it's not like he was, separating. Again, it's not like the easiest place to kind of evaluate running backs just because you're only seeing a couple reps in team each day where they rotate so many of these guys through. But Gordon was not one that really stood out. In terms of the big backs, Devin Neal, on the other hand, definitely did stand out in the drills that I guess they show in Mobile. Running routes on linebackers, he was just getting a crazy amount of separation. He was just burning guys left and right. Very, quick, explosive kind of burst mover. I think his long speed's probably going to end up a little better than most people expect. He told me when I interviewed him that, a lot of people see him as, maybe not having the greatest long speed. He told me he's hoping to run somewhere in the 4.45 range. And if he runs that, his draft stock will be in pretty good shape, I think. To sub out Ollie Gordon for another bigger back that I was interested in, it was Miami's Damian Martinez. This guy was consistently standing out in terms of, when he got a chance to lower his pads and pop somebody, he was doing it and you were noticing it. He's, kind of a bad intentions sort of runner. He's finishing his plays well. He told me that's the best part of his game is finishing plays. He's not as refined as a pass catcher, not as refined in pass protection, especially for a guy his size. You'd like to see that be a little better in pass pro. But I think actually in Mobile, his pass pro didn't look so bad. It was just more in his college tape. It was a little rough. So maybe this is something he's improving on, which is, good news for him. But I think he has kind of deceptive lateral agility and vision. He doesn't have the long speed, but he makes up for it with kind of dicing through. Once he gets to the second level, he's really good at kind of picking the path of least resistance and finding, where he can pick up some extra yards. This is a guy that's going to drive his legs and pick up a ton of yards after contact. And so he's somebody that's really intriguing to me, maybe in like the third, fourth kind of mid-round range.
Jonathan, who was the best pass protecting running back down there in Mobile from the probably the limited drills that they put him out there for? And then second, not saying that there's a Jamar Gibbs. Who was the most explosive? The guy that you can see getting the edge and being able to have those explosive runs.
Yeah, when it comes to like the best pass protecting back, I would probably say either Neal or Martinez. Just having that size, that strength, the Stonewall guys, kind of like more of just a stronger dude to be able to take on some of these blitzing linebackers. When it comes to like more of the pass catching, like explosiveness, like a couple guys that really stood out to me were Bishal Tutin from I think it was Virginia Tech. He just was consistently making plays, especially in the passing game. Like he had a really, really nice catch, like on the left sideline, got both feet down inbounds in coverage with the linebacker, just showing like being a multifaceted guy where he can make plays with the ball in his hands as well as a pass catcher. I thought that Brashard Smith from SMU, he's a former wide receiver converted to running back. I thought he consistently just stood out when it comes to one-on-ones, just consistently showing great route running, getting crisp separation on those routes from linebackers and safeties. It just wasn't fair with him in one-on-one practice, and then also just making plays out in space as well too. He was a big reason for SMU's success this year, and he definitely is going to be a great scat back or satellite back at the next level for a team that's looking for one to complement more of a big bruiser. Another guy that really stood out the first day when I kind of was watching was RJ Harvey from UCF, he's a little bit smaller guy, but he's really dense for his size. Like he's 5'7", but 208, and shows like good burst once he gets the ball in his hands and is able to get a little bit of a runway. He's also possesses really good contact balance. He's a capable pass catcher, but those are a couple of smaller backs that stood out. But when it comes to the best pass catching dynamic back, I would probably say Smith kind of won the day for me.
I don't know if you're able to talk to all of them or not, but of the ones that both of you talked to, who was the hearts and smarts winner of the running back group?
It would definitely be RJ Harvey for me. Just this guy that, had a very successful career at UCF, was a guy that, kind of was overlooked coming out of the process, and honestly was always saying, oh, you're too small, or, oh, you can't do this. But he put so much of an emphasis on doing whatever the team needs him to do, really put an emphasis on congratulating his coaches, his offensive line, the players that have made it successful for him to be in this moment. And he was definitely a great interview for me. He was one of the first guys I interviewed down there, kind of stood out as one of the better interviews in this whole process. I definitely would say RJ Harvey gets that award for me.
Ross, who was your hearts and smarts winner of that group?
Oh, I do have to. I know I was kind of talking down Gordon, and I don't think everything about his interview was great to me, but there was something that stuck out to me. It's that he got injured at one point in 2024, and basically people were asking him, hey, are you going to kind of opt out of the rest of this season to protect your draft stock? Because again, this is a guy that was talked about as one of the top players coming out of 2023. And I think he even received some Heisman votes that year. And so, he said, no, I'm definitely going to finish what I started. That kind of stuck out to me. But in terms of, I think Damian Martinez, in terms of the smarts aspect of it, he was very self-aware, I guess I'll say, of what his strengths were and what his weaknesses were, which I think is important to me. He knows kind of what his strengths are and how to use them, which was finishing, and he knows where he needs to improve, which is with the pass protection and with the kind of catching. He needs to be a every down kind of back, and I do think he showed that improvement in Mobile in terms of the pass protection. So it's kind of good to see him self-aware of what he needs to improve on there.
As we start to wind things down, I want to go back to cornerbacks. Jonathan, I'll start with you. And I don't mean to throw a million names at you, but Darian Porter feels like that avatar type of corner that Pittsburgh gravitates towards. 6'2", 33-inch arms. Other guys that seem to draw some buzz down there. Quincy Riley from Louisville. Azariah Thomas, I think, is a really interesting guy from Florida State. Raw, but the tools are all there. Would not be surprised if he ended up getting first-round buzz by the end of this draft cycle. Talk to me about those guys and any other corners that might have stuck out to you.
Yeah, I think you hit a couple of the top names right off the head. I think, guys like Darian Porter was a guy that, Ross really gravitated more into this process, and I'll let him talk more about him, but definitely a guy that had that length. That it's interesting because he wasn't really much of a big producer in college up until this past season, but definitely a guy that stood out in terms of his speed, in terms of his length, in terms of his ability to contest bigger receivers at the catch point. I think he had a pretty solid showing there down in Mobile overall. Quincy Riley is just a ball hawk coming out of Louisville. I mean, the guy's been playing in college for 5-6 years now and has a bunch of ball production to speak for it. I think he definitely was competitive, and you showed a little bit of those instincts and that awareness in coverage to be able to click and close on the ball very quickly. Azariah Thomas was a guy that stood out to me because the last day, just because another name, Maxwell Harrison, I'll talk about later, was not practicing, but Azariah Thomas stood out to me on that third day of Mobile. Just his ability to use his combination of size, speed, and length to contest passes. He was active in the run game. He took some lumps in one-on-one drills, but for the most part, I would say he won far more than he lost. Just a guy that kind of stood out. And then I would say Maxwell Harrison was probably a big standout at cornerback for the week. I think he walked away with a minor injury on day 2, and that caused him not to practice on day 3. But honestly, he probably didn't have to practice on day 3 just because of how he performed the first 2 days. I thought he was very aggressive in coverage. He did a great job of bump and running with guys. He did a good job staying in phase with them down the field, across the field. He also let you know about it a little bit too. He'd be chirping a little bit, just kind of that attitude and swagger that you want in a cornerback. I think that he performed really well down in Mobile.
He once said his play style was greedy, and that is certainly, I think, evident on tape with his instincts and his aggressiveness on the football. Ross, talk about Porter, former receiver turned cornerback, could maybe have Pittsburgh intrigued.
Yeah, I think certainly they would be intrigued with him. I think the first thing that stands out is his frame. Obviously, you talked about the avatar thing, 6'02", 197, 33 and a quarter inch arms. He was the fastest player of the week per the Zebra Technologies tracking that they have on site there, kind of tracks guys' acceleration, deceleration, top speed. He was the fastest top speed of the week. This is a guy that told me he's looking to run 4.3 flat range. And so he's certainly showed that speed. There was a couple reps where, guys were doing shallow crossers and getting kind of separation at the top of their route. But as he kind of ran across the field with them, he made up a ton of ground. You could just see his kind of recovery speed is absolutely there. In terms of press coverage, has the length. He knows how to use it. He's good at kind of jamming guys at the line of scrimmage with that length and making sure they can't get off the line clean. He uses that to his advantage. He told me that's a big part of his game. Another thing that's impressive about him, he was initially a wide receiver when he came to Ole Miss, and it didn't really work out for him. And so he kind of carved his path out as a special teamer. Took that very seriously. Ton of experience playing gunner. He said he loves gunner. He also, I think, blocked 4 punts. So this is a special teams ace kind of guy. So that's it has Steelers written all over it, if you ask me. Definitely, I think he only had like 7 or 8 starts in college, so he's not as experienced, but 6-year college guy, ton of special teams experience. Before he was starting at corner, he was kind of playing intermittently, kind of off the bench, and so he does have overall a fair amount of experience at corner. But yeah, overall very impressive. He was a big hearts and smarts guy too. Just seemed to love the game, loved the special teams aspect of it, and how he kind of earned his way through that onto the starting roster at Ole Miss. Very impressed with Porter overall. Very intrigued to see where he ends up going in the draft. I did want to make one more comment about Hairston, and I guess this is kind of also true for Porter. Both of them length guys, and much like the Steelers, Joey Porter could get caught at times being a little grabby. So that's just the one knock on both of those guys. Need to control their length a little better.
Fair enough.
Who was the best press corner of the group?
That might have been Hairston to me. Yeah. He has, Porter was good at it, but Hairston a little bit more physical, a little bit more aggressive. I think he represented himself well in that regard. He was wearing a Mad Max chain that he said he bought with his NIL money, and that's his nickname is Mad Max. And I think that fit pretty well in terms of some of his press coverage skills.
And who profiles as the best slot guy down there?
I would say that's probably Upton Stout, who we talked about a little bit earlier, the Western Kentucky guy.
Okay.
My last question for you guys, I'll let Dave finish things out afterwards. Putting Steelers needs aside, just the best player you saw down in Mobile this past week.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. Honestly, I think if I had to go with it, probably like either Zabel from North Dakota State or Besh, the wide receiver from TCU. I think both of them really stood out in terms of just executing day in, day out consistently over 3 days. I think, you look at the stability, we really talked a lot about Cody Mock and guys in the past of that from North Dakota State. I thought Zabel represented himself well, even though he might have not gathered as much publicity or hype just because he has all of his teeth. At least I think so. So I think that's one thing that, I thought he did well just overall throughout the week. And I think Besh really represented himself well, just consistently winning, consistently being head and heels above a lot of the other receivers in his group. And then you kind of saw that out with the performance during the game. He just stringed together 4 straight days that were really good.
Ross?
Yeah, Besh is definitely up there. I think Jalen Noel, I spoke about earlier, was one of the big winners. If you look at defense, Darius Alexander, certainly in terms of where he was viewed coming in to where he is now viewed coming out, I would say is the biggest winner of the whole event. I don't think he was really on anyone's radar coming in, and now he's being viewed as kind of a top, maybe probably a day 2 kind of guy. So Darius Alexander is one of the big winners, obviously going to be linked to the Steelers, given that he was talking to, what was it, Weidel on the third day there. One more name I'll throw out that was impressive to me. We didn't really talk about the inside linebacker group because the Steelers probably aren't going to look there, but Jeffrey Bossa was very impressive to me overall. He is coming out of Oregon there, kind of a guy who led that defense, kind of a green dot guy, if you will. He was explosive. He's super athletic. He looked, he had a very good frame overall. He's probably the best cover inside linebacker that was there, but he was more than willing to come downhill. So he was another big standout to me.
We didn't talk about Ty Robinson out of Nebraska when we talked about the defensive lineman. They had him listed as an edge, but he's a big boy at 6'4", 7'8", 296, 10-inch hands. The arms a little shorter than probably what I thought they'd be at 32 and a half. From the practice tape and all that I saw, seemed like he kind of underwhelmed in Mobile. Was that kind of the takeaway there? Did he kind of lose some of his shine in Mobile?
I think with Robinson, like, he definitely was productive at certain times. Like, he was a guy that me and Ross really like keyed in on, but at the same time, like, I kind of like thought he was disruptive at times, but in terms of like productive, like, there's times where he would like slash into the backfield and kind of show that quickness, kind of kicked inside, considering he was playing as a big edge. Then he'd line up more inside, but in terms of like winning consistently, especially in the one-on-ones, I think like that's somewhere where he definitely needed to show in some improvement. So I think definitely not a guy that like had a ho-hum week for the most part.
Obviously, the Steelers won't be drafting Mike, who is it, Green. He's going to go way, way early. But if they were to look for an edge later in this draft, a guy that kind of fits that outside linebacker Steelers mold, someone that can play on special teams, who was that guy down in Mobile?
This one's an easy one for me. It is UCLA's Femi Oladejo, I'll go with. 6'0", 261, 33 and a half inch arms. He just looked the part. I mean, this guy is like an action figure. Like he just looked like a superhero, all rocked up. He was, on the first day, probably the biggest winner to me in the one-on-ones. I mean, he was winning around the edge with speed. He was bullying people with power. I don't think he's receiving a ton of buzz in terms of his draft stock, but he could be a very intriguing late round guy. And I think there was some, was it Devin Jackson reported that he was talking to, I think it was Roderick Moore, maybe the Steelers strength and conditioning coach, which I don't know how notable that is just because Roderick Moore was running the stretch line for that team, but clearly, talking to him a little bit. And so he's definitely a guy I would circle.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I would agree with Femi. He's going to, kind of spoiler alert, he'll be on my mock draft Monday this upcoming week. I actually sat down and talked to his agent on the flight back from Mobile. We flew back together from LA, and he's actually the current agent of Cam Heyward as well. So it's kind of interesting to make that tie there. But he like talked about Femi, how he's like a good guy, how he's that hearts and smarts. He has relatively that size of like just under 6'3", 261 pounds. He had 14 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks this past season. So he plays with his hair on fire. Definitely kind of a guy that the Steelers would look for.
One last question for me. Who was the best? I was a big Gavin Bartholomew fan a couple of years ago, especially in his early years, but kind of the buzz about him seems to fallen off the last couple of years here. But tell me about Gavin Bartholomew out of Pitt, his week down there, and who was the best all-around tight end down in Mobile?
Yeah, I think with Bartholomew, like, he kind of was like, he was there, like, and that's the thing I think I recognized with a lot of the tight ends. Like, they were there, they did well, like, they went through the drills, but it's like not a lot of guys stood out. I would say the guy that really stood out to me was like Elijah Arroyo from Miami. Just did a great job of like just showing that explosiveness as like a pumped up wide receiver, but also was like active in driving his hands and feet like as a run blocker as well too. I think he had the best week.
Ross, best all around tight end.
I'd probably agree Arroyo was the most impressive tight end of the bunch, but if I had to throw out a couple more names quickly, LSU's Mason Taylor, obviously the Hall of Fame bloodlines there. I thought he had a pretty solid week. He's big enough to kind of hold up as a blocker, and he wasn't maybe the most impressive as a receiver, but he did enough. And then Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, an interesting guy. He's definitely got athleticism and versatility. They had him playing fullback, tight end, even, a little bit of a kind of split out wide for a couple reps throughout the week. And so very versatile athlete. I don't know, probably a little more raw than the rest of the guys just coming from a small program, but I thought Fannin represented himself well.
And big time production from Fannin as well. But as you said, the size, the fit's going to be the thing with him. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our roundtable. Really appreciate Ross, Jonathan, you guys hanging out with us and all the work you guys did down in Mobile. Also want to thank Ephraim Geller, who could not make it today, but also was really important with his practice notes and the interviews he's done. I know more is still to come from your guys' trip down in Mobile. So thank you guys again. Have you on, I'm sure, before the draft kicks off. But again, thank you, Ross. Thank you, Jonathan.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you guys as always.
Yeah, thank you.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Again, our special thanks to Ross McCorkle, Jonathan Heitritter for their great work at practice notes, interviews, and a lot of strong insight on this 2025 class. And always see a couple of Senior Bowl participants who end up landing in Pittsburgh come the draft. And I'm sure this year will be no exception, Dave.
Yeah, as I say every year, man, take a good look at those rosters and invites to the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, and obviously the undrafted declares and all like that. And even it's good to see that these All-Star games are allowing these underclassmen to compete. Obviously, not all of them competed and all like that, but I mean, there's a good bet that the Steelers' first round pick will either be an underclassman, top underclassman that in other words, an underclassman has a better chance to be a first or second round pick from the Steelers. And then on top of that, if it's someone that did not go to Mobile, it will likely be somebody from that Senior Bowl list. And it would be surprising to have even one at this point player in the draft class that was not a participant or invitee to either the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl. So, and we're just scratching the surface on a lot of these guys, but it is good to have for how many consecutive years now? 5, I guess, that we've had people at either the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl. And look, we thank the listeners and the readers of the site, because without the support, we would not be able to flip the entire bill for sending these people to both of these All-Star events, along with the Combine as well too. And I really did enjoy the talk these last couple episodes with the roundtables.
Same. It's really important, boots on the ground information, and I think we do it as well as anybody out there. So appreciate the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl crew for all their effort and all their insight. All right, Dave, let's wrap things up. Super Bowl 59 LIX held this Sunday between the Eagles and the Chiefs. The Chiefs looking for the three-peat, the Eagles looking for revenge after losing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We'll make our picks for this one, Dave. Just overall, before you make your pick, what are your thoughts? What are the keys to the victor in this game?
I tell you, when it comes to the Chiefs, overall, I think what I'm looking forward the most to is, can the Eagles not only stop them on third down when it comes to the Chiefs offense, can they get them in enough third downs? Because wasn't that one of the things that we highlighted coming out of this last game, I think, about Buffalo, was the few times, what was it, nine, I think, third down situations. I'll have to pull it back up here. But I think if you want to slow down the Chiefs, you got to stop them on third down, because they were so damn good on third downs. And not only that, you have to get them in more than a dozen third down situations. If the Eagles defense can do that, they stand a lot better chance to win this game, man. The Chiefs offense just isn't overly explosive overall. Obviously, look, what I would do if I'm the Eagles is I'm making Patrick Mahomes try to push that football down the field as much as possible. I am spying him. I'm not going to let him beat me with his legs too many times there. And if I can come out of this Super Bowl and I'm on the losing side of it as the Eagles, I want to come out of it with, damn, Mahomes was able to push the football down the field. On the flip side, if I'm the Eagles offensively, I've got to get Saquon Barkley going. I've got to get Jalen Hurts going with some of that zone read stuff and all like that. And then if the Chiefs demand on trying to shut that down, I think the Eagles have a better are built better enough to be able to push the football down the field to guys like AJ Brown and company there. So those are the keys to the game. I think specifically if the Eagles want to win this game, I think we're going to look at the third down stats, specifically the number of times that they were able to get the Chiefs in third down situations and whether or not they were able to control the explosive play. You got to cover guys like Travis Kelce. Obviously, I'm not going to let Travis Kelce go off. Somebody other than Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes have got to beat me in this game. And it goes just to say that what's the Chiefs' track record when they don't turn the football over? I mean, they haven't lost, right? I don't think this season. When they've done that, you got to find a way to get that ball away from them, even if it's a fourth down stop and you want to count that as a takeaway there. So I think these are two evenly balanced teams. I think this should be a good game overall.
Yeah, it looks like they are 7-1 in the regular season when they don't turn the ball over, but the one loss came in that week 18 where they benched everybody against Denver.
Right.
So that one doesn't even count. They're effectively, as you said, undefeated whenever they do not turn the ball over, have that clean sheet. I mean, I think the Chiefs, their path to win is obvious, just the way that they've been winning with great defense, great situational football, third down, red zone, late game type moments. They've won 17 straight one possession games. Dave, that stat blows my mind. They know how to close out games, how to win tight. They've done it in different fashions: offense, defense, blocking, field goal, special teams. So it really has been a team that has won in a variety of different ways. If you're the Eagles, you gotta take a page out of the Buccaneers. And how did Mahomes lose his one Super Bowl? Well, he was under siege the entire game, and so the Eagles' front four has to get home, and they have to be able to pressure Mahomes. And the Eagles have the front to do it. They led the league in sacks this year with Nolan Smith and that interior rush, especially Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, an underrated D tackle out of Louisiana Tech, who's come on strong for them. Even Bond occasionally off the edge, and so that front four though, that rush really has to get home. If you're the Eagles, do you come out throwing in this one, expecting the Chiefs to take away Barkley? It's kind of a Steelers 05 run feel where they threw the ball early and teams didn't expect it. I wonder, obviously Barkley's got to be an important part of this game plan and this victory for the Eagles if that is to happen. But I wonder if you're Philadelphia, you try to flip the script and come out throwing a bit, assuming the Chiefs are going to stack the box and put all their emphasis on taking away Saquon Barkley.
Well, look, you wouldn't be here. The Eagles would not be here if not for Barkley, I think. So as much as the temptation, and I'm sure the Chiefs will line up saying we're not going to let. I think you got to come out at least trying to do what you do with Barkley, regardless, and see where it goes from there. And then obviously open it up if the Chiefs are. I still think the Eagles will be able to run on the Chiefs overall. I don't want to get in situations though third and long where guys like Chris Jones and because their pass rush, the strength of the Chiefs defense is their front and the way their unpredictability as far as pressure packages go. I don't think they're as strong in the coverage aspect of it. So I think Hurts and company got to do a good job of when they do getting in more predictable pass situations of being identifying or at least trying to identify who's coming and potentially get that ball out or down the field as quickly as possible. But if the Eagles win this game, I think we're going to be a lot of talk about Barkley. This is a guy you got, even if you have to use it in the quick game and put Barkley, outside some of those quick screens or use your screen game in general, you got to get the ball in Barkley's hands because he can he's a guy that can flip the field for you. So I don't know if I come out and just say, all right, I harken back to that first meeting between the Steelers and the Ravens, and how Henry did not get the appropriate amount of touches. They cannot kick themselves after this game. The Eagles are saying, man, we should have got the ball in the hands of Saquon Barkley more. They've got to get him his touches, and it's got to start early.
That's fair. It's a dance with who brought you kind of thing. And so that I totally get that. I think as much as we talk about Mahomes and Hurts and Barkley, the trench play is going to be just a really important aspect. The Chiefs O-line, how does Joe Tooney hold up at left tackle? He's done a good job this year, but a big test this weekend. Creed Humphrey, that interior O-line, Trey Smith, et cetera, against Carter Williams, et cetera. That Eagles interior D-line is going to be important. And then the Eagles offensive line, the health of guys like Dickerson, and how do they handle Chris Jones and Karlaftis off the edge, Maillotta, Lane Johnson, the tackle. I think the trench play is going to dictate a lot in this game. All right, Dave, let's make our pick. Should I start first here with my selection? What's the line sitting at right now? I'm not even sure what the line is.
I thought it was 1.5, but let me double check real quick here on
that
draft.
Chiefs favored 1.5. I'm guessing.
Yeah, let me double check. See, it's still the Chiefs 1.5 on DraftKings right now. So this will probably go off. Probably at 1. Probably, I bet. There are a lot of people. The Eagles seems to be the very, very sexy pick in this one. People, because look, three-peating is hard to do, right?
No one's ever done it.
All right. I mean, and people wonder if the Chiefs might have some fatigue. Anyway, but 1.5 is the line. So which way are you going on this?
Yeah, it basically becomes pick 'em at that point on such a tight line. I mean, the Eagles, like you said, are the sexy pick. There's a lot of reasons to believe in Philadelphia. It's a really strong roster, top to bottom. I love the coaching matchups, too, in this one. Vic Fangio and Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator, Sirianni, Reed, who's going to come up with that great scheme call, that great call in the final moments. It always seems to be the Chiefs, though, Dave. They always have that great call. Teams know what they're going to do. They still can't stop it. Don't get beat to the flat. All the Chiefs do is win to the flat, no matter who the opponent is, what the situation is. They find ways to make that ace call in tight moments, late game. That's why, again, they've won 17 straight one-possession games. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this one day by, we'll call it a field goal, but the Chiefs three-peat.
Well, what score do you throw out there?
That's a good question. I will say, set by 3, 27-24.
Okay, I'm glad you went that way because I'm going the other way on you here. I have been going against the Chiefs, I think, most of the season. Right, this is the week, right, that dink and dunk always is going to catch up with them. And I think the Eagles got that takeaway mentality, that ripping the football out as best they can. I think they get a couple of turnovers, get that ball out in this game. I think the Eagles secondary is better. I have faith that they'll be able to get Barkley going in this. And I just think all of the things that I've been going against the Chiefs, especially on the offensive side of football, with them finally catch up with them in this big game. So I'm going with the what seems to be the sexier pick, especially kind of on the major media side. I have the Eagles preventing the three-peat in here by a score of 29-27, and I think this time it's the Eagles that pull it out with the late game heroics.
I like the score, 29-27, bit of a curveball there. Do you have Chiefs fatigue? Are you rooting?
Yes.
Yeah, you do?
Yes.
I don't. I really don't. I obviously love Pittsburgh to be in it. I'm not really actively rooting for either side here. I just want it to be a good game. That sounds so cliche. But, I can appreciate the great runs, historic runs, teams that do things that no other teams can do. Like, whenever I wasn't a huge NASCAR fan growing up, but I know Jimmy Johnson dominated for a decade and people got tired of him winning. And I was like, this is awesome. I want to just see a dude do something legendary that people will talk about 50 years from now. And I can be like, I was part of that era. So, I mean, again, I'm not sitting there putting on my Chiefs hat, but I don't really have the fatigue that others do.
I don't sit here and say, oh man, I hate Patrick Mahomes, or I hate Travis Kelce, or I hate, look, there's a lot of players just by the way they play the game to be impressed by. I have the fatigue of I'm tired of the Chiefs winning, and I don't hate Andy Reid. I think he's a fine coach. I don't hate Steve Spagnuolo. Once again, there's no core reason to sit here and root against the Chiefs, but I find myself in my heart of hearts not wanting them to get this three-peat. Period. And look, I'm not, I'm obviously not an Eagles fan, and if it were up to me, the asteroid would hit, before this one. But I do find myself rooting for the Eagles in this, and I do have Chiefs fatigue.
Do we have any fun props for the Super Bowl? Any fun prop bets out there? That's always the
let's see here.
Gatorade color, et cetera, coin toss.
Passing props, Patrick Mahomes, 241.7, I guess. No, let's see. What is the prop on that? 250 plus, I think.
Over passing
under?
Yards?
Yeah.
I'll take the over.
I'll take the under. 225, I think I'm showing here for Hurts. I'll take the over 225 or Hurts.
Yeah, I'll take the over too.
Let's take some receiving props. Receiving yards for AJ Brown, over or under 70.
I'll take the under.
I'll take the over. Travis Kelce, over or under 70.
I mean, this dude's historically good in the playoffs, even though all attention goes on him. I'll take the over.
Will there be a 2-point conversion made in this game? Successful?
Well, you got 29, so maybe you're going to say yes on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes.
I'll say no.
All right. Yeah, I don't have a lot of them pulled up, but we annually have the 20 question contest on the site that'll go up. I think Saturday I'll have that form out there. So if people want to stop by Steelers Depot, we'll have the time of the national anthem, heads, tails, all the funny little props that we do every year. I recycle the same ones, just change the names out and all like that. So if you're looking for a fun little free contest to enter, go to SteelersDepot.com on Saturday and fill out the form and all that kind of good stuff, and we'll have a little bit of fun with that.
And I know you're excited for the Kendrick Lamar halftime show, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know all the words, all the songs, Not Like Us, all that stuff, right? All right.
The older I get, I don't even know who most of these people they have are doing the national anthems in anymore these days. But look, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I watched the commercials and all like that. So it's football. I'll watch it.
For sure. Amen to that. All right, Dave, let me ask you one last question before reader emails. It's going to be a complete guess. It is the subject of my terrible take today. When will the Pittsburgh Steelers return to their next Super Bowl? They have not appeared in one since 2010. That, of course, was the loss of the Packers. When will they go back to the big game?
I obviously don't think it's going to be 2025, and I don't think it's going to, from where I sit right now, until something changes, it doesn't feel like 2026. So,
the next decade, in the next 10 years, will they make it?
I think
not even win, but just make it to the game.
I think they will within the next decade.
Do you? Next decade. Okay. Yeah. I went for my terrible take. Complete guess, no reason behind it, 2037. So just over a decade from now, 12 years from now, we'll revisit this podcast because you and I will be doing this podcast, I'm sure, in 2037. So that's my guess. But even with Ben, they only got to, I don't want to say only, they only got to 3 though. And there was less competition then. There was Brady and Manning as your big quarterback obstacles. Now you got Mahomes and Burrow and Jackson and Josh Allen and whoever else comes up. I mean, CJ Stroud, if he bounces back, whatever quarterback of the future that may not go to Pittsburgh ends up being, it's a lot of teams like that. You can't avoid these guys anymore.
Right.
Back then, you could avoid Manning, you could avoid Brady potentially. That happened in 2 of Pittsburgh's 3 runs. You really can't do that in this era.
Look, they need a franchise quarterback, and it's all going to revolve around that,
And then even when you get one, which is incredibly important, there's no guarantee. Now you're just on par with those teams, and you just have to then try to cut through those teams, and then it depends on the rest of your roster and all that kind of stuff. So even as Lamar has shown, as Josh Allen has shown, a franchise quarterback, you have a top tier guy, you have MVP winners. They have no appearances in the Super Bowl, so that doesn't even get you the whole way there.
All right, shall we get to some emails here on this long show?
Yep, and let's close out today's show.
All right, Nick Shuley back in here with us. Happy Friday, guys. On Wednesday, Alex said, when was the last time the offense drove the bus? The Steelers beat the Bengals 44-38 in Cincinnati in what was probably their best game of the year. The offense drove the bus and then some that game. Russ and company outplayed Burrow and company. Burrow might be the best quarterback in the league, he writes. Then they did so by audibles. We all know what happened the last 5 weeks of the season. With recent headlines about handcuffing the offense, it makes me wonder with Tomlin and Arthur Smith, what is most important? Is it winning games or is it their own egos over what makes sense for the team? He says it seems like the Steelers care more about being right than winning. I don't think it's that. I just think that they just this overarching philosophy that the organization seems to have about playing good defense, running the ball, controlling the ball effectively, not turning the football over and especially when not having a quote unquote franchise quarterback at this time. I don't think it's people's egos.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. When I say the offense driving the bus, I'm not talking about just one game. I mean, the offense for a moment was top 10 in scoring. They looked a whole lot better. But when was the last time you went into a season saying we're going to win because of our offense?
Right.
It's really been killer bees like 2017, 2018. That was the era. So yes, there are moments in time where your offense has a better day and the defense had its own struggles this year in the latter half of the season. But when I say that, I'm talking about because the mentality for Tomlin has been the defense is going to be our strength. That's how we're going to win. And so we're going to play a conservative brand of offense that does not lose the game. And we're going to bank on our defense winning the game. We don't want to turn the ball over, take away possession, shorten the field, give teams points when we want to win these lower scoring type of games. That's kind of been the overall philosophy. Not entirely wrong, but there's been a consequence to that because Pittsburgh is forever in these rock fights, as you say, Dave, and they can't beat the playoff teams that can put up points at will. And so that's just want to clarify when I say driving the bus, I'm talking about like big picture going into a season philosophy, not just about one particular game.
All right, have one from another Alex, from an Alex here. Alex Campbell writes in, I am in the camp of hoping that the Steelers choose to re-sign Fields for next season, and I feel like many people believe that will be the case, but I'm not so sure. Alex has said many times recently that it is Mike Tomlin's job to find a franchise quarterback and that Mike Tomlin has tremendous sway over the construction of the roster. If that is true, then wouldn't Mike Tomlin very likely choose to re-sign Russell Wilson, the guy that he went out on a limb for last season? The report said that Mike Tomlin liked Wilson more than the others did, and Mike chose to stick with Russ through the 5-game losing streak. The team even seemed reluctant to implement the Justin Fields package to the level that many wanted them to do, especially late. Justin only played a combined 5 snaps in his final 7 games. He was inactive for 2 games due to injury, but still, he writes, I believe that Mike Tomlin's influence led to the team leaning away from Fields and towards Russ, and I believe that his influence will also lead the Steelers to re-sign Russ this offseason. That, I mean, it's a great email. Mike Tomlin seemingly went, what did he say, rogue or forget?
Lone Ranger.
With that. And if Mike Tomlin indeed has the most say as far as the groceries, how much is Mike Tomlin banging the table to have Russ back to take one more swing at this thing, deeming him maybe as the quote unquote, franchise quarterback, if you will.
It's a really fair point. Other Alex, or us Alex is pretty smart guys, I think. I had made that point just in passing in a recent podcast too, that it is the fairest and strongest case to make for Russell Wilson's return. But I will say this. Tomlin turned to Russ in part because he wanted to see what the offense would look like. It was not necessarily an ironclad, Russ is definitely the guy. He's going to lead us to the promised land. It was a little bit more of, the offense under Fields has still been kind of the same, scoring 17, 20 points per game. I want to see what Russ can do with this group. Can he elevate this group to another level to get us over the hump? And initially, it did. The team did. But then the whole bottom fell out the back half of the season. Obviously, they were held under 18 points per game in 5 straight games, first time since 1969. So Tomlin certainly, I think, has an affinity for Russ and vice versa. But Tomlin's motivation was partially, I just want to see what it looks like more so than 100% Wilson's the guy, all in on Russ. And then, of course, they got off to a good start. They were 10-3, and you weren't going to switch back to Fields at that point, who got hurt in that Eagles game anyway. And so that's why he's stuck with Russ throughout the rest of the season. So, a point well taken, but I would say Tomlin's motivation was maybe a little bit different than what is construed and believed.
All right, fair enough. Thanks for the question, other Alex. From Ron, hi guys. With the Super Bowl just around the corner and Andy Reid announcing a return to coaching next season, I wanted to get your opinion on this, especially after seeing the graphic below. Which do you think will happen first? The Steelers will win their 7th Super Bowl, or the Chiefs, 49ers, Patriots, or some other team will surpass the Steelers in all-time Super Bowl wins? He says, I feel like the aura mystique around the Steelers is slowly eroding. So he wants to know if the Steelers will win their 7th Super Bowl, or if the Chiefs, 49ers, or Patriots, or some other team will surpass them in Super Bowl wins.
I got to go with the latter. I got to say that Pittsburgh will be surpassed. So right now, what is it? Patriots and Steelers tied with 6, if Wikipedia is to be trusted. Brady has 7, but one of those came in Tampa Bay. That's what gave me pause for a second. Dallas, the Niners have 5. The Packers, Giants, and Chiefs have 4. Obviously, the Chiefs are going for 5 this weekend. So this is surpassed, not just tie. So who's going to get the 7? Can one of those teams get the 7 before Pittsburgh gets to 7 themselves?
Well, I mean, who you look. The Steelers don't have a franchise quarterback yet, right?
Yeah, I just said I made my prediction, my random guess of 2037. Will other teams get to 7 by then? And that assumes Pittsburgh even wins that, which was just not my prediction. I think it's more likely someone pass. It's most likely the Chiefs pass them by. Can Mahomes gets to 5? Can you get 2 more in the next decade? Certainly.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. It's hard to go against that right now for sure.
So hope not. Now, obviously, nobody knows. We're all just speculating, but that's my guess.
All right. Dan Devlin writes in, hello, gentlemen. Thanks for the great coverage and your opinions about what the Steelers should do to be more competitive moving forward. He says Steelers are not Super Bowl contenders as things stand. How many teams are contenders? Steelers are division and playoff contenders, correct? But what 2 or 3 things, if anything, could put them up to Super Bowl?
Did we get this one?
Oh, we might have. Yeah.
We went through the 6 teams that were Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah. And then he asked about the undrafted. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. We did read this one the other day. All right, I think we got through most of them here then.
All right, so we'll come back Monday. We'll talk about whoever won this game and whatever else news happens to break along the way.
All right. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. And once again, we'll have the Super Bowl prop contest up on the site on Steelers Depot, hopefully Saturday morning. I invite you to fill all of that out, Mo, and Alex and I'll be back on Monday to recap the Super Bowl, whatever else maybe has transpired Steelers related there. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version, hit the ad-free button on the site. Follow the directions. We do have an app available for iOS users, available at the Apple Store as well, too. So make sure you're checking that out. So until Monday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.